What's up, all you real beasts? Magic Pat here, and today we're doing a little tackle review. Haven't done one of these in a while, so I figured now would be a good time since I've actually put a lot of work in on this specific reel and put a lot of time on the water, so I can kind of tell you more about it now than just whenever I first bought it. So I'm actually talking about the Shimano tranx. I actually have the 200 XG. I've actually got two of these reels. They're made for saltwater fishing, for inshore trout, redfish, that kind of thing. Most people buy them for bass fishing. I actually have two of the same ones, the 8:5 gear ratio. They're really fast. For the fishing that I've been doing, I needed it to be fast. You know, I do a lot of trout fishing with these, speckled trout, you know. Several of my videos have been out there catching big speckled trout out of the kayak and everything else. And these are incredible for keeping up with the fish, especially when you get a bite and you have a lot of line bagged out behind you. You can catch up to them really quick. They're not the strongest reel in the world, I would say, drag wise. They only get like 12 to 15 pounds of drag. I mean, it's fine. Most bass reels only get about 10 to 12 pounds anyway. You start getting into the specialty reels when you start getting like 25, 30 pounds of drag. And of course, the larger models of this reel, they have 25 pounds of drag or more. But this model was meant to be more like toned down, smaller. You're targeting smaller fish. I mean, you still could catch good fish. I've actually caught some pretty big trout and some big bass on these reels. Super smooth, like incredibly smooth. It holds a ton of line, so I've got 150 yards of 15-pound braid, and I've got about 60 yards of 14-pound mono on top of it, just for the extra stretch. This reel was the one that I was actually using when I was down in Keaton Beach catching all the trout and everything. The mono actually helped out. I decided to use a circle hook on the popping corks, which is it's a new way of fishing for them I've never done before. I wanted that stretch because mono and circle hooks go hand in hand. Like, they work on braid, but the extra stretch that mono gives really helps circle hooks get the corner of the mouth, and they just help up with the hookup ratio like tremendously. So I decided to go ahead, put some mono on top. It's a really good looking reel. It is starting to get a little bit of like boat rash. I don't know if you can see it or not. The finish is pretty tough, but it's not so tough as that it can't get scratched up. These scratches are actually just from like riding in the kayak as I'm going to places. I've decided to actually start putting reel covers over them. There are some bass reels that I have and other reels that don't, in my opinion, need a cover. It's nice, but they're so tough you don't have to really worry about it. These you kind of want to put a cover over. These are higher end reels. They're meant to be precise instruments of fishing, but the paint job on them, if they get hit pretty hard, it's chipping up. Which, you know, it's not a big deal. For me especially, I don't care if my reels get scratched up. They don't have to be beautiful to go fishing as long as they handle a good fish. However, I will say, for all the punishment that I've put it through, that's all of the damage that has pretty much happened to the reel. And whether y'all know it or not, I've told it before, I am pretty harsh on my equipment. I use higher end drag, so like I'll pretty close to max or just under max. I like, you know, really tough drag that wears out reels really quick. I usually use reels for more than what they're designed for. I've thrown cut bait on these, even though they're not really for that. That just, you know, it eats up the bearings quicker. So far, all of the fishing that I've done with this reel, I haven't seen any kind of problems whatsoever. I haven't had issues of water getting in it. These are rated for saltwater. They're made for inshore fishing. I haven't had any kind of water intrusion. Just basic cleaning has done everything needed to keep them going. These are really good reels for the price. You know, they come out about $199, about $200, whatever. I want to say it was like $210 with taxes and everything included. Like I said, tons of line on it. I mean, I've got almost 200 yards of line between the 15-pound braid and the 14-pound mono on top. They've held up really well as far as like getting banged around inside of my kayak, inside of the back of my truck. I haven't had any problems with the side plate coming open, and that's actually one good thing about these. You can just push a little knob on the side and the whole thing pops open and can let you take the whole spool out. So it makes cleaning and everything else super easy on these reels. And all you got to do is just push it back together and push the tab back up, and locks the reel back in place. So super awesome. I'm trying to think of what else this reel is. I mean, it's hard to describe everything this reel is good at because it just does everything. So one of the things that I actually like about this reel is the star drag. Even though it's just like your average star drag in a way, you can get super precise drag settings on this bad boy. They click in. Even though it says 12 to 15 pounds of drag, I'm pretty sure that you can get it a little bit more if you tighten it down. But honestly, this reel is so good, and just the amount of drag that it puts off if you have it paired with a good rod, I've had no trouble fighting decent sized fish on these. I'm trying to think. I think the largest fish that I have fought on one of these was probably, I want to say it was a big redfish. I've been smoked a few times on this reel, having giant fish hit, but it's always, it's not the reel's fault. I like to do things with these reels that they're not designed for. Like I said earlier, putting a big chunk of meat on it. But I also like putting my equipment through torture to see what they'll actually handle. And so far, I mean, I've hooked little sharks and everything else on these reels and have had no problems whatsoever. I've taken it jigging. I've used it on a jigging rod and did perfectly well. I've caught stripes on these bad boys. As a matter of fact, I want to say the biggest fish that I've caught on it was a stripe, was about 15 pounds. And that was one heck of a fight on this reel. It feels amazing. I want to say with the type of line that I had on it at the time, that was probably the max that it can handle. I had heavier line, not as much on the actual reel itself. I would probably stick to about the 15-pound braid on these so you can get, you know, an extreme amount of line on them. I might even go down to like 10-pound braid and have over 300 and something yards on basically a little bass reel. Handled super well against stripes. Did that large speckled trout on this. I mean, I have nothing bad so far to say about these reels. I've been using this one for almost a year now, and I have put it through everything you can think of. I've caught catfish on it, striped bass, largemouth, speckled trout. I've hooked sharks on it, and it has held up beautifully. There's been lesser brands that I have burned the drag out of a lot quicker than what this thing has gone through. So for the price, I would say this is perfect. It's expensive without getting too expensive. This would almost be a good higher end beginner reel just because of how easy it is to set the drag and to cast and to fight fish from. You know, you got the knob here to adjust how much tension you want on the spool, so you can throw lighter or heavier lures. And actually another little thing that's pretty cool, if you know about this, that's cool. If not, you can take it open just like I did. Open, push the lever, and the plate slides up. These little white knobs right here, let's see if you can actually see it on the camera. These little white knobs right here, these bad boys, if you pop these up or down, you can adjust the tension on the spool more or less depending on what you want. Basically, it slows down the spinning of the spool, or, you know, helps let it continue going at the pace it's at. So you can actually, without messing with the knob too much, you can adjust these and kind of get a broader adjustment to throw bigger. So like if you need to throw a big lure, because I've thrown big swim baits on these, and if you just adjust those without using the knob, it can give you a broad adjustment to how much tension you want on the spool, so when you're casting, it won't backlash as bad. Now, if you pair that up with adjusting the actual tension knob on here, I've gotten to where I've thrown some huge swim baits for this size reel. I've thrown some almost 8-inch swim baits. Wouldn't recommend it on these. They're not meant for that. I have done it. But also, I have used adjustments with this plus the little tabs inside here to get to where I'm throwing one of those little spider lures that barely weigh anything, and I'm throwing it like 30-40 yards, getting it up into lily pads and stuff. So you can basically do anything you want with these reels. I would just say be careful throwing larger lures on this, because it's not really made for that. If you're going to do larger lures, you're going to use this for like smaller swim baits. I would say probably the max would be a 6-inch swim bait, and that's still probably too much. I would go heavier line on this, probably go with like 50-pound braid. It's probably only going to hold 110 yards, maybe only 100 yards of it. But with a big swim bait like that, you're not really wanting the bass or whatever you're fishing for to run. You're going to want to tighten your drag down and try to horse this fish in as quick as possible. So I would say lighter lures, fishing like I was doing for the speckled trout, using just a piece of fluorocarbon about 18 inches long with a jig head and a gulp shrimp. I did really well with that. I caught a ton of good fish doing that, caught some flounder and everything else. So an amazing reel. It's a good price for it at around $199, $200, somewhere around there. It's not too bad, but you still get the quality of a higher end reel. And I love tranx anyway. I love the Shimano reels. The more I use Shimano, the more I'm actually leaning towards using them more. I've always been a Penn guy when it comes to saltwater, but just here over the last couple of years, I've slowly leaned more towards my Shimano stuff. Yeah, incredible reel. I have it on a 7-foot rod right now that I've been using for the trout. It's a new rod that I've never used before, and it's done so far it's done pretty good. Yeah, these Shimano tranx have really deep spools for the size reel that you're using. Just to give you an idea of how big the spools are, I took all of the mono off. So if you look at the spool right there and you see, let me tilt it a little bit, see if maybe you can get an idea. That's 150 yards of 15-pound braid. Yeah. There is still a lot of room now that I took the mono off. I'm pretty sure you could get almost 300 yards of 15-pound braid on this thing. I took off probably 70 or 80 yards of 14-pound mono. Like this, it holds a ton of line. These little reels hold just an exceptional amount of line, and you can do just about anything you want with them. I actually plan on doing a torture test with these here soon. I'm going to rig them up with the biggest piece of bait, the biggest rigging. I'm going to try to put these things up against big catfish. I'm actually going to take them out. Next time I go to Tennessee, one of the things I want to do is I want to drift fish for channel cats and, you know, small bass and things like that. This would be a good reel, I think, for doing that also, especially from a kayak. These are really easy to use from a kayak. They're really easy to keep clean. I took one fully apart. I haven't taken the other one fully apart, but they're super easy. They're easy to maintain, basically, is what I'm trying to get at. You can't go wrong with one of these for whatever you're going for. I've even seen some videos of people using these exact reels catching smaller Goliath grouper. They put like 50 yards of line on it, just like 100-pound braid, to like a 80-pound fluorocarbon leader and a big jig weight or jig head with a big hook, and using giant swim baits that are catching, you know, 25, 30, 40, all the way up to 60-pound Goliath grouper on this exact reel. So don't be afraid to go for big fish with these. Especially my hands, they feel small. Like I can wrap my hand all the way around this reel. They're not big at all. But even though my hands are pretty big, they don't feel weird on this reel. Like it sits in your hand perfectly, in my opinion. A lot of times I've got some reels that, like, if I like to cup the reel when I fish, and some of them are so small and they feel so weird, it's almost like I'm fishing with a toy. These you don't have a problem with, and because of the way they're designed, when you put your hand around it, they fit perfectly in your palm. So I mean, super easy to use.